Hey guys, Level Cap here. Today we're going to be talking about whether or not Battlefield 1 is dying, or rather losing its player base. We'll be looking at a few different things today. One of them though will be the DLC, the release schedule, and how it compares to previous Battlefield games. Now there does seem to be enough talk in the community to warrant answering this question. I see comments all the time saying Battlefield 1's boring, I've gone back to Battlefield 4, this game is dying. Well, first of all, let's clear up one thing. The game is not dead, nor is it dying at a rapid rate by any means. The average peak player count is about 500,000 players each day, which is incredibly impressive. Thanks to websites like BattlefieldTracker.com, we can take a look at the actual day-to-day player population. There was a huge spike, of course, right after Christmas. A lot of console players got the game. Not as much of a spike in the PC market. I'm guessing a lot of PC players just bought the game prior to the holidays, but we've seen a very, very steady, if not slightly growing PC player base. And the console market has dipped off a little bit after Christmas, but you have to imagine a lot of people who initially started playing the game after Christmas weren't necessarily either the biggest fans of Battlefield, or maybe they just got the wrong Christmas gift. So statistically, the player population is fine, and a large part of that is due to, I'm sure, how much fun Battlefield 1 is to play. It was a relatively stable launch. It came with an incredibly fun new game mode, Operations, and it's still a whole new era of combat and gameplay that the average shooter fan is probably not used to or burned out on by this point. So it's got a lot going for it. That being said, where is this mentality coming from? Why is there a portion of the community that's already become bored with Battlefield 1? And I can certainly answer this question based on what has been said in the comments. People are upset with the lack of content in the game, and I'm certainly feeling it myself. And it's not just a feeling, but it's statistically way less content that was released in previous Battlefield games, especially Battlefield 4. Now, I don't think DICE ever wanted to release less content. It's always a problem for developers that are on a tight production timeline where you have to release your game by holiday season. You have a strict 3-year development cycle, and anything beyond that is not acceptable. So sometimes with new designs or new concepts, it can take longer. It's very hard to predict how long it's going to take to design a game, and I believe this time around they opted to sacrifice content for basically the quality of the release. So rather than working on getting every little bit of content done and ready for the launch and launching it with a buggy title, they instead focused on polishing the game and having a nice solid launch. And you could argue that that was a good idea or a bad idea. In the short term, definitely a good idea. Long term, we have yet to see. Now, I did a video a little while back comparing the launches of Battlefield 4 and Battlefield 1. And sure, Battlefield 4 had a little bit more content than Battlefield 1, way more weapons, almost 3 times as many weapons that you could use, especially primary weapons in the game. But map-wise, vehicle-wise, that kind of stuff, things were pretty much on the same level. What I didn't really look into as much was the DLC release dates and the release scheduling. Now, Battlefield 1 came out October 21st, Battlefield 4 came out October 31st, so a mere 10 days apart. Battlefield 4 slightly later. However, by the time Battlefield 1 releases its first DLC, Battlefield 4 had already released 3 DLCs, or approximately. We don't know exactly when in March They Shall Not Pass is launching for Battlefield 1, but March 31st is when Battlefield 4 launched Naval Strike, which was the 3rd DLC that came out for the game. So by the time Battlefield 1 has 4 maps and probably 4 new guns and maybe a couple vehicles, Battlefield 4 already had 12 new maps. That's more than double the amount of maps the game launched with. 15 new guns, 6 new gadgets, and 3 new vehicles. That was all part of Premium. If you got Premium then, you could even buy that DLC individually and use the guns and the rest of the base game. So just to give you a comparison, there is a huge discrepancy at the rate at which content is coming out for Battlefield 1 versus Battlefield 4. I definitely think that Battlefield 1 started the DLC production at a much later date compared to Battlefield 4. And that could be for any reason, but the fact that the premium details for Battlefield 1 weren't even known until not that long ago shows that DICE probably didn't know them themselves. They didn't have a full roadmap, a full game plan for their DLC schedule. And again, just to point out the discrepancy here, Battlefield 4 released October 31st, China Rising came out December 3rd, barely over a month between the game coming out and the first DLC dropping. So content was coming out right away. The community was getting tons of stuff, really becoming a really attractive game right away with lots of content and energizing and exciting the community. Battlefield 1 coming out October 21st. They Shall Not Pass is not coming out till March. That could be 4.5 to 5 months after the game came out. So we're talking a magnitude of 4.5 to 5 times longer for the first DLC compared to Battlefield 4. This is not like an insignificant change between the way the games were being developed or the launch schedule. This is a major change, and I don't know if it was a big screw up or they were behind schedule or because they were doing a brand new game. They had a lot of new problems or things that they had to adapt to, and it just put them behind schedule or whatever. But it is a big change, and people are right to complain about the lack of content at this point in the game if you are used to previous Battlefield games, especially Battlefield 4's content-rich release. And I haven't even taken into account the fact that Battlefield 4, with almost 3 times as many weapons as Battlefield 1 at launch, also had each of those weapons with their own progression and unlock and mastery system, and a huge camouflage system that you can unlock and earn for each gun. Plus, by the time of the first DLC for Battlefield 1, we also had 15 additional guns for Battlefield 4, each with their own unlock and progression system. There's virtually no unlock or progression system in Battlefield 1 other than unlocking the guns themselves, which takes very little time. So from a progression standpoint, it's kind of unbelievable how much of a downgrade Battlefield 1 is in comparison to Battlefield 4. Now, of course, there's plenty of people who play Battlefield simply for the fun factor with little regard for the progression, customization, or even the amount of DLC content available for the game. Some people just like how fun the game is. I'm definitely one of those people. I'm still really enjoying Battlefield 1, but based on the direction that the franchise has been going, especially with the rich DLC content for Battlefield 4 and even Battlefield 3, it's difficult to sort of take Battlefield 1 on as a Battlefield fan and feel like it's just as rich as the previous games. At this point, it does feel lacking in comparison. So as a long-term Battlefield fan, I have to say it is a bit disappointing where we are with the DLC situation in Battlefield 1, and people are without question right to complain about the amount of content and say that the game feels like there's not enough content. And even when you compare Battlefield 1 to not even previous Battlefield games, but the other big AAA titles out there like Call of Duty, Overwatch, even Titanfall 2 or Rainbow Six Siege, those games are far more content rich in comparison to what the DLC and the release schedule is. It is important nowadays to keep new content, rich content coming into a game franchise in order to keep the fan base interested, engaged, and continuing to play. I don't like the fact that even for me personally, I need new stuff to keep myself interested. I should just be fine with the fact that the game is fun and keep playing it. But I will say I do start to get bored with it simply because of that. And my interest gets piqued by other games that come out with new content, new DLC, and I start to check those out and play those a little bit more. It's just the way we are as people, especially if you're caught up in the modern video game consumer culture. It's what's going to interest you. It's not something I'm proud of necessarily, but it is the way that the industry works. I have no doubt that DICE and EA are aware of how far behind they are with their DLC release schedule. Whether or not that is intentional or by mistake is something that I still don't know. Hopefully Battlefield 1's first DLC is an absolute blast, knocking it out of the park and reinvigorating everybody's interest in the game if it's been waning. We already know we are getting less content for Battlefield 1 Premium than we were for Battlefield 4 Premium, so that's a little bit of a letdown, but I think DICE and EA can make alterations to Premium or their content plans for the future. Only time will tell what's going to happen with the progression system and the content available in Battlefield 1, and I'll be there to cover it and let you guys know what's going on. As always, guys, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing out.